Welcome to The Lead. And our top story today, it's been a national talking point these past few weeks. Thanks, all in part, to our intrepid investigative journalist, Sikonathi Mantshantsha. He's refusing to take his foot off the pedal when it comes to the numerous allegations of dodgy payments to the tune now of multi-millions into the billions at the Government Pensions Administration Agency. Well, first came revelations, if you remember, that the agency had awarded a company many millions to lease out a Pretoria building for a decade, which the said company had zero control over. These are certainly not the only questionable contracts that the agency's dished out now that it's landed itself in hot water with National Treasury, albeit after News 24's investigations had gained public traction. With a new acting CEO appointed to discipline those who allegedly targeted whistleblowers within the agency, we now turn to Manshantsha for the very latest on this developing story. And today he's flanked by our well-known consumer financial journalist. You may know her. It's Maya Fisher-French, and I'm very pleased to have both of them on this panel today. Thank you so much, guys, and welcome to The Lead.
Thank you, Graham. Hello, Maya.
Hello, Sikonathi. So lovely to see both of you.
Fantastic. Sikonathi, I thought let's begin with you. So much has sort of happened, and we had to make time here on The Lead to catch up with you. We had it in our trending topic from yesterday. But it's Shula Developers, this company that claimed to have had ownership of the building in the ghost lease deal. They've paid back the money. Is that right?
Graham, yes, absolutely. But just before we get there, let's make sure we get this one right. The forensic investigation, Nexus Forensic Investigators, which has been appointed to find and hunt down the suspected leaks, was actually appointed by the chief executive that has now been suspended. That was her last act at the agency on the 22nd of August, and Stadin Gomezulu came in the week of the 25th of August. So it is not him that initiated that contract. Whether or not they will now proceed is a different story, but it was the suspended Kitiboni Madiye on the day that she was being suspended. But at that point, she had not received her letter. So that could be her last act at the GPAA.
And on that point, Sikonathi, before we go to Maya, so that's kind of like her last act in office before she got her suspension letter. It's quite revealing. What is Nexus's supposed job here? What are they supposed to do? Root out those who leaked information to the media, or is it broader than that?
Absolutely. They were Nexus Forensic Services has been hired at a price of R250,000 to mirror image 7 computers and 7 mobile phones belonging to employees obviously suspected by the executive as led by Kitiboni Madiye at the time of being the leaks. So they'll mirror image these 7 computers, and they will interview the employees concerned and present the report to the executive, which itself now stands accused of serious irregularities in the audit forensic report, which National Treasury has now instituted an investigation against them. So those who are themselves suspects in serious gross irregularities are actually hunting out for what they call the snitches.
Thanks so much, Sikonathi. I thought I'd bring you in here, Maya, because you have this excellent piece on the front page of News 24 today and the business section, how 1.2 billion rand scandal impacts government employees' pensions. And before you get corrected by Sikonathi about the total value of the scandal, because it is growing day by day, I thought you could expertly sort of contextualize for us how the negative headlines that we're seeing currently at this particular administration's agency, which we've already covered in the past, shouldn't really exist in the first place. How does that sort of affect the pension payouts that we see at the main government employees pension fund, if at all? What did you find?
I think it's important to understand that, in the sense that the GPAA is paid by the GPF to obviously manage the funds on behalf of their pensioners. So I think it's important to understand that where they fit in. There's 1.2 million active members and about 500,000 pensioners receiving an income. And that's what the GPAA's job is to do, is to make sure that they get their payments. In terms of the impact of the GPAA on the actual fund value, I spoke to the GPF, and I think it's a couple of things to understand. Is first of all, the GPF is one of the few pensions in the country that's guaranteed. So it's based on final years of service and your final salary. But the fund performance is impacted by anybody who resigns before retirement, because they will actually pay it out on what we call actuarial factors, but one of those is the value of the fund. It also can impact pensioners who are receiving inflation increases every year, because the GPF guarantees that they will receive a pension increase of 75% of inflation, but they can pay more than that based on the growth of the fund. So the value does matter. But actually, when I had a look at it, the expenditure by the GPAA is budgeted and approved, obviously, and it doesn't necessarily affect the rate of return. But what it does affect is the amount of money available to invest. And I think that's why it's really important. Are GPF members getting value for money from the GPAA? And I think that is probably the big question for me.
And is that related to, Maya, if I may ask, how much budget, obviously, as you alluded to in the beginning of your answer, the GPAA thus gets? So if it overspends its budget, then it doesn't have as much liquidity then to ensure that the value of the pension payouts is secured for future payouts. Do I have that correctly?
Well, absolutely. If you are, any money that gets invested for the members, first of all, it's deducted and admin fees are deducted. So the bigger the admin fee or the cost of running it, the less that is invested, which can grow. So obviously the costs of running that are very, very important. Although I do probably have to say, in defense of the GPAA and GPF, they're actually not that expensive. When I ran the numbers, if you look at, I think the latest numbers, they're not official yet. It's going to be about 1.4 billion was paid to GPAA. It works out at about 865 Rand per member per annum. Let me tell you, much cheaper than the private sector. So I think that's probably important to mention. But of course, we do have service, a different level of service between the GPAA and the private sector.
Too loud. If you said that out too loud, they might just think you mean they haven't stolen enough. So be careful.
Well, on that
what you get for your money, Sikonathi, that's the point, right?
And that's your expertise, Maya. Sikonathi, Shula Developers, this company that alleged to have had the Pretoria building that it touted as having some sort of control over, and you found that it had no control over in this 10-year lease deal that the GPAA was so close to going ahead with, if it were not for whistleblowers and investigative journalists like yourself exposing and bringing it to the public sort of understanding and talking points at the moment. They come back and they actually on the outgoing CEO, while she's suspended, Kedabone my dear, they've come back and they've paid back the first tranche that they got from the agency. Is that right?
Graham, absolutely. They have paid back every cent they actually received. Let's contextualize that for the listeners and the readers again. Shula Developers offered a building and won the tender to lease to the GPAA the Brooklyn Bridge Office Park, which is a beautiful building in Pretoria, for the next 10 years for the head office, for GPAA to use the head office. It actually has come to light that they don't have access to the building because the owners of the building have told me, no, that's our building. We've got our tenants there. We've never spoken to anyone about that building, at least not for this purpose. So it is not available. That then makes that particular lease deal fraud and a fictitious thing to have done. But that's not that was not enough for the GPAA and Shula. They went ahead and entered into another contract to partition the office and the interior of the building, to refurbish and divide it into offices. And for that, they signed a contract, one that was not subjected to any procurement process, for 239 million rands. And they agreed, again, irregularly, they agreed to pay 15% of that upfront to Shula, which was 35.9 million rands. When we picked this up, the whole lease thing, and realized what was going on here, we started asking questions first about how you could lease a building that you don't own or have no access to, and 2, how do you refurbish a building that you cannot even access, and 3, why did you receive upfront payment? The GPAA didn't answer that question, and Shula, of course, tried to pretend that it was a very regular and all things were kosher on that contract. But quietly, while they thought we were looking away, and significantly, on the day Kidiboni Madiaye was suspended, they paid back the 36 million rands, which they had told us they received legally and they were properly entitled to it in terms of their contract. They paid it back, but guess what, Graham? They neglected to pay about 4 million rands in interest by my calculations.
Sure, must be nice, eh? You can just give back the money. It's fine. I'm walking away. It's all good. Maya, back to you. We've heard about the corruption sort of allegations, the dubious payments under various investigation, whether that's trying to find out who had leaked the information or from a more government perspective of, actually investigating the payments themselves a lot closer. Let's talk about the GPAA in itself. Sikonathi's of the opinion, hey, we don't need this freaking agency. The GEPF should be governing itself, and that's where it should end. It shouldn't have to extend a whole bigger budget for another agency where, it could potentially fall into the wrong hands and thus become another sort of corrupt feeding trough, if you will. What do we know about the track record of what the GPAA already does in essence, its day-to-day sort of operations? Does it paint itself in a good light or not?
Well, first of all, I would probably disagree with Sikonathi about that. I think the fact that there was separation of powers is actually quite critical. So I would be more concerned that there weren't people watching each other, because it's actually the GPF who obviously picked up the problem with the GPAA. And any retirement fund has a separate administrator. So I'm more for more checks and balances than less. Whether or not the GPAA is doing the right job, that's another question. I think all you have to do, first of all, okay, as a consumer financial journalist, I sometimes tell people that I am the GPF's call center, because the amount of complaints I get from GPF members who cannot access, information about their funds, who are not getting paid out. And it went through the roof with the two-pot retirement system, because, of course, all these withdrawals are being made. But it is constant. I can just give you a screenshot of my inbox right now. You will see I get so many complaints. So first of all, I can tell you anecdotally, there's an issue around service levels there. But you just have to go to the GPF's last annual report, well, the last one that was published for 2024, and they actually specify that there have been service delivery challenges, and they acknowledge that, that there's a problem. And it even showed that the GPAA had performance had fallen below the agreed service level standards. And in particular, it failed. It was bright. It was in red, right? Member administration, fund financial management, and good governance and compliance. So yes, that even the GPF itself in its annual report identified the GPAA as having issues with performance. And then in March 2024 as well, we had the hacking of the system, which compromised a whole lot of data of members. Now, I'm not going to pick on GPAA only here. It's been happening to a lot of corporates as well, but obviously, again, highlights some of the really big issues with the GPAA. And I would say that's probably, for me, the biggest issue here is, yes, maybe they got 1.4 billion to administer the fund. Maybe it's only 865 Rand per member, but are they doing their jobs? I'm sure members wouldn't mind even if they were paying more in admin if they actually got the money when they needed it and when they asked for it.
Very quick one, Maya. While you're on that note, sorry, Sikonathi, we'll come to you now. Just to contextualize for the listener, how big is the fund in general and how many members? Do you have that offhand?
Yeah, so the fund, the last valuation we had, it's about 2.4 trillion. So it's a lot of money, by far the largest pension fund in the country. It has 1.2 million active members and about 500,000 pensioners who are receiving an income. And I think it is important, and I have made this point before, that obviously you're going to see a lot of complaints from the fund that's the largest, right? Percentage-wise, just simply the numbers are staggering when it comes to the GPF relative to any other pension fund. But I think the problems are still very, very significant.
Sikonathi, your response to Maya's view of it?
Graham, I was going to say it's very nice that Maya is actually disagreeing on the need for a separate GPAA to administer the GEPF's fund. Actually, she then went right ahead and defeated that whole argument. But guess what? The two lions can be busy debating and whatever, taking points here, while the buffalo gets away. And the buffalo here is the maladministration in the GPAA, which should not exist as an independent entity, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, and then we've seen it from Maya's point of view, and from your point of view, of course, the dubious payments and giving it such a huge budget. In total, other than the ghost lease deal, we've spoken about ICT contracts on the lead in the past. How many deals are we talking about in total? And what's the total value of, in your mind, this is now big red flags over the total value of contracts that thus need to be investigated and looked a lot closely by National Treasury, Sikonathi?
Graham, so far on News 24, since the 2nd of August, we have published questionable deals riddled with serious allegations of irregularities to the tune of 2 billion rands. That's because you take that 1 billion rands lease, which is fake, and there will be no moving in there. You take the 239 million rands that came with it. You take the 26 million rands to another company, the architects. You take now a 500 million rands biometrics contract. You then are now with the 46 million rands that was paid on that biometrics contract. So far, we have 2 billion rands of questionable and dubious transactions that have been entered into. And let's remind the viewers, as Maya has just done now, their budgeted, approved budget is 1.47 billion rand per annum, and they have spent 1.56 billion rand, which is 100 million rands more than approved. But they have now already exposed 2 billion rands in irregular transactions over the next 10 years. And that is a very big concern. Think about the figures that Maya has generously given us now. 800 rands per member in admin fees. Is that per month or per year, Maya?
That's per annum. Yeah.
Per annum. That, if my math serves me right, 2.4 billion rand for the 1.7 million rand, for the 1.7 million members a year. That is money, in my view, that also is very much exposed to a lot of irregularities if the GPAA is allowed to continue as it currently does.
Sikonathi, with the investigations, this is kind of like what I wanted to get out of you from this point of view. We know that Nexus Forensic Services is now looking a little bit closer within who raised their hands about, the alleged wrongdoing and thus informing the media. And that was, as you say, the final act from the outgoing suspended CEO. What is the status of an official investigation, if any, at the moment? Where is it coming from? Who's leading it? Do we know?
Graham, before I answer that question, I should tell the GPAA, I could have told them for free who the sources are if they had asked. Yeah. The audit committee of the Government Pensions Administration Agency is the source. It actually produced a report and gave it to the finance minister and said, Minister, please subject these deals to a forensic investigation. They didn't have to waste a $250,000 rands taxpayers' money or pensioners' money on that. The audit committee told the minister, here's a report, please investigate. But be that as it may, your question is, what is the status now? The GPAA said when I confronted them yesterday about this investigation, are you really hunting the whistleblowers who are actually save your organization and make sure that the assets of the pensioners are protected? They said, look, we are involved in a process that will eventually put a stop to this investigation. Those are their own words. We are currently involved in a process that will eventually put a stop to these investigations. That's the GPAA. In other words, I read, this is my reading of it, That statement says we will cancel this investigation that Kidibone Madiehe instituted on the last day or the few hours before she was suspended on the 22nd.
Sure. And I mean, we don't need to sit here and talk about the safety of whistleblowers in this country. It's paramount that the people who had exposed very critical information that needs to be investigated and looked at a lot closer need all the protection that they can get. Maya, what would you say to somebody who's listening to the lead right now on News 24 and going, I'm getting a payout from the state pension fund. What do I take away from all of this at this stage? We obviously, in your view, need a GPAA that is essentially stable, running efficiently, and doing its job.
Well, first of all, just one question I want to actually ask is, if Sikonathi had not run these articles, would anything have happened? And I think that concerns me, because I think that the timelines show that nothing actually was happening until it became newsworthy. And I think that would be my big concern, is that's why, of course, the media still exists, and why thank you to all of those who have paid their subscriptions for News 24. So really well done. But I think this obviously raises huge concerns for members who are sitting there really relying on this money, especially if they are retirees and need to be paid out, or they're coming up to retirement. So I think it's really important that this gets addressed, and I think that the service levels within the GPAA are addressed as well. And that is really what I would love to see as part of the investigation, is whether the GPA service levels are actually acceptable as well. Look, it is a little bit more complicated, I have to tell you, because employers within the government are also terrible at bookkeeping and record keeping, and often they can't find the forms they need. There's a lot going on there. So I'm not putting this all at the feet of the GPAA, but I do think one has to, when you're dealing with pension money, you just have to be held to a higher standard.
Your view on that, Sikonathi, and just to end off, what can we expect next in your series of investigations into this affair?
I can only say at this point, there's watch this space. There's more coming. Definitely, the GPAA's management has not done itself too many favors pursuing this line of business and the irregularities. I do have a lot of documentation that I am still sifting through, and there may or may not be a few more stories ahead. I am not at this point able to tell you exactly what's coming. But
and you're doing a lot of interviews, eh? Left, right, and center. You're cheating on the lead. Of course, many of the findings that Sikonathi has been alluding to over the last short while is running on the front page of News 24. An exclusive whistleblower witch hunt. State Pensions Agency pays investigator to find News 24 sources. That's for the very latest there. And of course, we alluded to this earlier in our discussions, how 1.2 billion rand scandal impacts government employees' pensions. Maya Fisher-French details that, finding how exactly, if at all, the value of pension payouts will be affected. We need the GPAA to be stable. Sikonathi says a little bit otherwise, and both views can live alongside each other, is my view at the end of the day. Nkosi kakhulu, Danko, I really appreciate both of you. Thank you so much for bringing your knowledge to the lead.
Siyabonga, thank you so much.
Thank you, Graham. Sikonathi, lovely. Nick, happy to chat again.
Thank you, Aya.